In this video, I'll show you how to create, apply, edit, and summarize scenarios in Excel. Scenarios are very useful for accounting for future uncertainties. For example, you may have a pessimistic future scenario, a neutral future scenario, and an optimistic scenario to account for different views on how the future may unfold. In our example, we have the sales and costs for company ABC in 2021, as well as a forecast of how much these figures will grow in the next 4 years. Therefore, the sales revenue figure in 2022 is the sales figure in 2021 multiplied by 1 plus the sales growth figure, and the same principle applies for the costs as well. We want to be able to account for different scenarios which will lead to changes in these growth figures. Perhaps there'll be a recession and our sales will plummet in the next few years. Alternatively, the future may be great for the company and will benefit from increased sales and economies of scale, leading to a lower growth in costs. To create a scenario, we go into the Data tab, click What If Analysis, and then click Scenario Manager. We then click Add Scenario. Our first scenario will be an optimistic scenario, so we can call this optimistic. We'll be changing cells D6 to G7, which correspond to our sales and cost growth figures, so we can add these here. You'll also notice that we have the opportunity to add any comments here, which we'll leave blank for now. We can now click OK, which shows the scenario dialog box. In our optimistic scenario, we're going to assume that sales increase by 5% every year, while costs increase by only 3%. We can therefore leave the cost figures as they are. Once you have added the values for each of the changing cells, click OK. Therefore, we've created our first scenario. We're now going to follow the same steps to create our pessimistic scenario as well. We'll call this scenario pessimistic, and once again it will involve changing cells D6 to G7. Next, click OK. For our pessimistic scenario, we'll assume that sales will increase by only 3% every year, while costs will increase by 4%. Therefore, let's add 3% for each of the cells containing our sales growth figures, and 4% for the ones containing our cost growth figures. Now that we've created both our optimistic and pessimistic scenarios, we can test them out. To apply a scenario, select the scenario you want to run and then click the Show button. Therefore, Excel has applied our optimistic scenario, changing the sales growth figures to 5% and the cost growth figures to 3%. To apply the pessimistic scenario, select it and then click Show. Excel has now changed the sales growth figures to 3% and the cost growth figures to 4%. To edit a scenario, select the scenario you want to change and then click Edit. Assuming you want to keep the variable cells the same, click OK. This will allow you to change the values of the variable cells. We want to keep these as they are, so we can click Cancel. If you want to delete a scenario, then select the scenario you want to delete and click Delete. Finally, we may want to create a scenario summary to obtain a high-level overview of the different scenarios in our spreadsheet and the impact they have on our outputs. To do this, click on Summary and then select the type of report you want to create. We'll select Scenario Summary and then it will prompt you to select the result cells. Here it's asking for our outputs, which for us refers to the gross profit cells. After all, we want to know the impacts of optimistic and pessimistic scenarios on our gross profit figures. Finally, click OK. As you can see, this creates a scenario summary sheet. We have the current values of the cells, as well as the two scenarios. Finally, at the bottom, we can see the impact of changes in the scenario on the gross profit figures. Therefore, the scenario summary gives us a high-level overview of all of our scenarios in one place. It's good practice to create a new scenario summary worksheet every time you make changes to your scenarios. This brings us to the end of this video. To recap, we covered how to create, apply, edit, and summarize scenarios in Excel. Please give this video a thumbs up if you found it useful, and subscribe to the Excel Hub for weekly Excel tutorials, techniques, and examples.